What are you talking about? We are getting land from them, and that's all. They are not being hounded out of the country.
Why would a country that was colonized, a country where land was forcefully taken away from the black people, why is it then required to pay money to the former white farmer?
There is enough land in the country, and out of 12 million hectares, what we want, about half of that, 5 million plus, and they only 4,000 farmers own 12 million hectares of the most fertile land in the country. Why can't they agree to 5 million plus coming our way?
This sounds confusing. It sounds unfair, but maybe the truth is more complicated than it looks. To understand this, we need a short look at history. During British colonial rule, Zimbabwe was called Rhodesia. The colonial government made laws that gave the best land to a small white minority. Black Africans were pushed onto poor land, crowded areas, and dry regions. They did not choose this. It was forced. By the time Zimbabwe became independent in 1980, a few thousand white farmers owned most of the best farmland. Millions of black Zimbabweans had little or no land.
Myself, I'm a widow. I have 5 children, no land, staying with my father-in-law, with his family, a family of 7. So where am I going to get the land?
By just giving every Tom, Dick and Harry a hunk of land is not going to solve that problem.
Land was not just about farming. It was about dignity. It was about belonging. And it was about justice. At first, Zimbabwe tried to buy land legally and redistribute it. But then this process was slow and there was no money. And most people simply felt that the change was simply too slow and something needed to be done. In the early 2000s, land was taken by force. Farms were seized and given to black Zimbabweans.
Well, I didn't actually intimidated him, but I told him that we have come to occupy your farm. Maybe somebody can say it's intimidating, but I was telling him that we are here now to occupy the farm.
This caused big problems. Food production dropped, the economy suffered, Zimbabwe became isolated internationally. Land reform was meant to fix injustice, but it also created a new suffering. So why is Zimbabwe paying compensation today? Here's an important fact. Zimbabwe is not just paying for the land that it took from the farmers. The government says the land was stolen during colonialism and belongs to the people. The compensation is for the developments on the land like houses, building, irrigation systems, equipment, infrastructure. This matters in the international law. Even if land ownership is disputed, buildings and investments are treated as property, and this connects the global system. Zimbabwe needs loans, investments, debt relief, access to global markets. To get this, it must follow international rules. These rules protect property, investment, contracts. If a country is seen as unsafe for investors, money does not come in. So this compensation that the government is trying to pay is not just about the history of what happened, but it is also about connecting with the new markets. It is also about trust with investors, because once the investors think that a country is not safe for investment, then they will cease from funding any investments in that particular country. This is the main reason why you see Zimbabwe has been promoting this campaign of Zimbabwe is open for business. It's because we are trying to attract investors from outside of Zimbabwe to bring in funding into Zimbabwe, to invest into Zimbabwe. So this compensation to the white farmers is also another attempt to try and get global access to these investors. Let me explain this part, which tends to be most confusing to most people. You see, in the pre-colonial world, in the pre-colonial era, land did not belong to individuals. Land belonged to the communities. You would go to the community chief and you would allocate the land. So you would have the rights to use the land, but you did not own that land. It belonged to the community. It belonged to the people, not to a sole individual with simply papers. When the colonizers came, they declared large areas empty. Indigenous systems were ignored or abolished. Land was surveyed, entitled, and registered. Best land was taken for settlers, while Africans were forced into poor reserves. The ownership of the land was backed by the colonial law, the police and military force, and racial exclusion. So the colonial land ownership was not just economic, it was political power. Now, the post-colonial Zimbabwe inherited the property law, the colonial land titles, colonial borders, and the economic rules. So because of this, we walked right into a trap. Because now, because of these laws, it meant that taking the land away from the white farmers became illegal. It was not viewed as us taking back the land that belongs to us. It was like us taking the land that belonged to the registered farmers who legally owned the land. So this explains the contradiction that people feel. Because by logic, this land never belonged to them in the first place. They took that land from us. But the post-colonial logic states that it recognizes the titles. It recognizes the person who is registered to be the owner of the land. Therefore, compensation is required. So pre-colonial Africa treated land as a community thing, like it was a foundation of life. It belonged to the community. It belonged to everyone. But colonialism turned the land into private property. So since we inherited these rules, right now when the law is applied, it looks at who owned the land according to the titles, according to the deeds. It looks at who owned the land and it also looks at who took the land away from the person who is written on the paper, to the name of the owner who's written on the paper. Therefore, according to the law, Zimbabwe now must compensate the white farmers because according to the law, the white farmers owns the land. So this is the main reason why the government of Zimbabwe is paying this compensation. But then this gives me one question. Who made these laws? These post-colonial laws? Isn't it the same countries that came to Africa and took away the land? Now we must pay according to whose laws? According to their laws. Because if we are saying pre-colonially, during the pre-colonialism era, the country belonged to, the land belonged to the community, belonged to the people. And then after colonialism, you turn the land into a private property. And then you make a law that protects you from anyone who wants to take that property. So you're the same person who's making the laws. And now, according to your laws, the country has to pay you. That does not make even sense to me. So these new systems, these international systems that are there today, they protect the property, but they do not take into account how the person acquired the property in the first place. This is the part that we all seem to forget. This is the part that they removed, and they remained with the part that protects the owner of the property. So this new system simply says, protect today's property, but do not fix yesterday's injustice. This is the law that we have right now, and this is the law that is making Zimbabwe pay the compensation to the white farmers. The colonial victims were never paid, but the post-colonial countries are expected to pay. I mean, make that make sense. And this is not only Zimbabwe's problem. It's happening to a lot of countries. Some people support this compensation, and some people do not support this compensation. But those that support are giving this argument. They say Zimbabwe needs economic stability. Zimbabwe needs investment, and Zimbabwe needs to reconnect with the global system. So this decision to pay compensation is what Zimbabwe needs to move forward. It may not be morally okay, because technically the land still belonged to Zimbabwe, and now they are paying for the land that was originally and forcefully taken from them. But this is simply a way forward, a way for Zimbabwe to regain economic stability. But then there's also another group of people who strongly disagree with this. They are saying Zimbabwe was never compensated. There are Zimbabweans who died when the land was taken from them. So simply paying back does not feel okay. It feels so wrong. And these people are feeling that the injustice is being repeated today. They are also raising this argument and saying, why should we pay compensation when we still have problems that needs to be fixed? Why should we pay that much amount of money if we can use it to create jobs? If we can use it to remove poverty? If we can use it to improve services, the medical services, healthcare services, to fix other pressing issues currently at hand? So these feelings are real and they matter. And these are questions that people have. And this is an ongoing debate that people constantly have. But this is not just a Zimbabwe story. It connects globally. It raises questions like, who really defines what justice is? Can history ever be repaired fairly? Should stability matter more than justice? So here's the real question. Is Zimbabwe's compensation a step towards healing and rebuild? Or it is just proof that post-colonial injustice is still happening today? There are no easy answers, but the question matters, not just for Zimbabwe. Let me know what you think in the comment section. Also, do not forget to comment, like, share, and subscribe to the channel. Until next time, it's goodbye for now.